Today in the Owner Suite, we're joined by my good friend Cameron MacMillan, founder of RotoGrinders, who's going to talk about what it was like to fail at his first company, but then have his second acquired for tens of millions of dollars.
You've been invited to the Owner Suite, where we get down to business with the movers and shakers in trading cards, NFTs, rare collectibles, and other alternative assets. Click the subscribe button so you can keep coming back. Now welcome Jeff Wilson, the sports card investor.
Hello and welcome to the Owner Suite. Today we're joined by Cameron MacMillan. Cameron is the founder of RotoGrinders. You may know them as one of the leading content and data sites in the daily fantasy sports industry, and they're now big players in the world of sports gambling as well. Cameron and I have been good friends for a long time, going back to college, and he's got a great story to tell because I followed Cameron's adventures through the first startup that he created while in college, and one that unfortunately didn't make it, one that he had to fail. And then from there, him going on to RotoGrinders, which they got off to a slow start as well their first couple of years, but then they went on to big success and an acquisition in the tens of millions of dollars. But it wasn't easy. And we're going to hear that story and some of the things that he learned from it. We're also going to get his perspective on investing in sports cards and in NFTs because he has been a big investor in both. It's going to be a great conversation. And this conversation is brought to you by my growth agency, 352.
At 352, Jeff and his team work with growth stage and enterprise companies to drive new revenue. They're experts at bringing your business to new customers and markets, building and launching digital products, and pioneering new ventures. Learn what they can do to grow your business by visiting growwith352.com. That's growwith352.com. 352. Let's do what's next.
Cameron, welcome to the Owner Suite.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm really excited to be here.
Hey, man, I'm excited to have you on. So, for the audience, Cameron and I actually have a long history, and I remember the conversation when we were in Gainesville, Florida, in my office building in Gainesville, Florida, and you told me that you were going to leave Gainesville and move to Nashville, and you were pursuing this kind of, what was it, basically a startup concept at the time with a couple of other guys, and you were going to get into fantasy sports and daily fantasy sports, and this thing was called RotoGrinders. And at the time I was kind of like, okay, but man, what a progression it has been.
Oh man, yeah. Looking back on it, I think it's been 11 years now. It's a little crazy to think of how much the time's flied and that it actually worked out. So thankful to be here. Thankful that RotoGrinders has an office in Nashville, Tennessee, but mostly thankful we've stayed in touch and that we still have a good relationship because you helped me along the way there in the early days.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a great story because RotoGrinders has obviously grown into being, one of the largest players of data and information in the daily fantasy sports space, and now sports gambling and sports cards as well. And so we're going to talk about all of that. But I also know that you had a venture before that didn't work as well. So I think it's going to be an interesting, some lessons learned here with the audience and everything like that. But why don't you start by, telling everyone where you're from and kind of how you got to Gainesville in the first place for us to create those connections so many years ago?
Yeah, definitely. I'm born and bred Florida Gator. Some people will love hearing that. Some people will hate hearing that, but born in Gainesville, Florida. So when I went to college, I really didn't apply anywhere else. University of Florida was the only college I really considered my entire life. And I think it's, got the perfect mix of academics, culture, and of course sports. So, I've always had a deep love for Florida football, and that was part of the reason I chose to go there, whether that's the right thought process.
It was my thought process too. So great minds think alike. I should have worn a Gator shirt for the interview today. But I didn't want to overdo it with the audience too much.
But as you can see, for those not on the podcast, as you can see, I worked the Florida Gator colors into the RotoGrinders logo. So
I like it. I like it. So we obviously met while you were at Florida, and you were pursuing entrepreneurship. You were kind of an aspiring entrepreneur. You were learning about entrepreneurship while you were there, and then you got going with a startup of your own. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, Florida was a very fun school to go to. I came in undergraduate knowing I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I built my first website. It's in wrestling space when I was 12 years old. We were making about $2 a week. My friend Bobby Adelson and I in Kanapahau Middle School. So I definitely knew at a young age I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. I love building websites. But there's a lot of fun things to do at university, as I mentioned, football and culture. So I got a little bit distracted, caught up in the accounting degree, a little competitive over making good grades there, which I didn't do a great job of actually. And somewhere around my senior year, I realized the light bulb clicked back again. It was time to get focused on entrepreneurship, and the fun days of college are coming to an end. So luckily the UF entrepreneurship program existed. It was in its third year at the time. And I went in head first after a meeting with Jamie Kraft, who's now in charge of the whole program. And it was an amazing year for me to get my mind focused on entrepreneurship and really go all in.
Yeah, and what's cool there, when I went to UF, which was several years before you, there was no entrepreneurship program whatsoever at all. And then when you went, there was, I think it was like a master's in entrepreneurship at the time. Was that the offering?
Correct.
Yeah, and it was a new program, as you said. It was in its third year. Today, there's a much more robust entrepreneurship program at UF, along with almost every college in the country, it seems. Like entrepreneurs, when you were starting to get into it and when I was getting into it, entrepreneurs were almost kind of a little odd or a little weird, or this thing that wasn't as supported or talked about. But then when you had the big startup boom and people like Mark Zuckerberg, kind of became these big nationally known personalities, now all of a sudden there's some campuses where the kid with the scaling app is as popular as the captain of the football team, I think, right? Or maybe not quite as popular, but it's getting there, right? So these colleges of all types have really embraced entrepreneurship, and UF is no different. They've got their own dedicated dorm now to students who want to be entrepreneurs and kind of a live and work, type coexistence. And they've got like their own startup kind of incubator, creator, maker spaces and all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, I was absolutely blown away when I went back to visit. A lot of that wasn't there when in year 3, when I started. Like you said, I think I was in 2009 was the year I started the program. That was, I believe, around the same year The Social Network movie came out with Justin Timberlake playing an entrepreneur. And like you mentioned, it was starting to get glamorized, which really did help culturally. One of the struggles I dealt with and why the program was so helpful to me was, I think you touched on it briefly there, but it's a hard thing to explain. A lot of people don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, why you're taking the risks you're doing. Specifically for me, my parents weren't doing. They were very, very unsure of the decisions I wanted to make. Most of my friends thought I was crazy. So what the UF entrepreneurship program did for me personally is it allowed for a year to kind of not be working a typical 9-to-5 and to just focus on business planning, focus on research, focus on creativity and exploring new ideas without feeling that social pressure from your parents and friends that, hey, back then, especially, like you said, it's more acceptable now. But I felt in that time frame a lot of pressure to just quit a job and take a leap.
Interesting. Yeah, that's true. I guess I never really thought about the fact that doing entrepreneurship through a college program actually gives you a little bit of cover in some way and makes it more legitimate to your parents, because you're doing it through a college program than if you were to just be out of college, out there in the real world on your own and telling your parents, hey, I'm going without a paycheck for a while because I'm wanting to start my own thing.
For sure. Absolutely. And, I would like to think that I didn't need that. I didn't have that much fear, but there's a lot of the fear was motivating too, fear of regret of not doing it. But it definitely helps you. It helps you take that leap if you're not 100% sure of what your first steps are going to be.
Yeah.
So some people may not need that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Interesting stuff. So I remember when we first started working together on your own startup venture. At that point, it was Raise the Village, right? It was an app. Was that the project that you were conceptualizing through your time through the Masters of Entrepreneurship program?
Yeah, it was. And just a little background for the listeners on how we connected. Jeff was a legend on the UF campus at the time. Our UF program actually was doing one of our case studies was on 352. And I think I found out who you were because we were doing a case study on it, and I showed up at the office, and you had, first thing I saw when I walked in was Nerf guns laying on the floor. And I'm like, that's not normal. And nowadays, I guess you're starting to see that stuff everywhere, right? So this may not resonate, but at the time that was really cool. And I just remember the office culture being really amazing at 352. I wound up interning in the project management division at some point after that, and with your wife Kim on Camp Pete. So that's how Jeff was definitely a legend on the UF campus at the time. We showed up, and when I to answer your question, the idea, yes, I used the UF entrepreneurship program somewhere during that time. Tom Shoes created, and for those that don't know what Tom Shoes is, Blake Mykowski started the 1-for-1 model, and it started with shoes, where every shoe you purchase is donated to someone in need. I'm sure almost every listener here has heard of them. It of course blew up. It was one of the first not totally nonprofit, for-profit companies with a social mission. And that really, I remember when I first discovered that company, and during the program, I remember where I was in the library, and I just got lost for like 3 hours reading up about it. And I think I started my business plan that night. But it kind of fell to the wayside for a little bit until one of my classmates, and just another benefit of going to a program like this is the networking. Met Jeff, met my business partners for this program, mentioned he was working on an app on a similar model. We brainstormed, we hit it off, and one of our third business partner, Biko Everest, was a native of Uganda. And we decided that, hey, at the time, Farmville was a huge social game for social good, billion-dollar company on Facebook. Why don't we take a game like this and apply that Tom's business model to social good? So we built a game to help villages in Uganda through the revenue and in-game currency.
And it was a really cool concept. I loved the social mission of the concept. And you guys did some really good work through it. I know you got to go over there and spend some time over there and really see the impact that you were having. But commercially, I remember you had, things were moving, but you never were able to kind of get that momentum to really turn it into a long-term sustainable business. In retrospect, why do you think that was?
Yeah, if I could, it's just like, as you call it, tuition. If I could go back, I do a few key things differently. As you mentioned, we were I think from a marketing and branding standpoint, we were successful. The mission resonated with people. The concept resonated. We reached the top 10 overall free apps at one point in the App Store. Apple even took notice of us. I think the most important and crucial lessons I learned during that time were the importance of a tech team, which you as a owner of 352 Media know very well, and also just the importance of a marketing team, and not in probably a traditional sense of marketing. And nowadays, it's heavily focused on analytics involved in every aspect of user data, sales data, and how people are not only using your app, but optimizing the sales structure. Those are a couple things that I just severely underestimated in the amount of funding raising that what it was going to take. I see it a lot in other entrepreneurs. It's a common mistake of underestimating the tech team needs. And we outsource development, and there's no problem with the outsourcers. Just it's not the type of project when you're playing with the big boys that you want to just outsource a budget cut budget on outsourcing development. I mean, when you're trying to hit a home run, especially with the game or an app, you want to be in the trenches with your web development team. Every little detail matters, and they need to be A-level talent. We didn't even really have a tech team. So I think the mistake was made day one there.
Yeah. And of course it's hard because you are, you were bootstrapping that thing, and, you were on a limited budget and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to get that going. The game space in particular, like, that's a tough space. I mean, I know some really world-class entrepreneurs here in Atlanta that have built great businesses that are also trying to build out a game studio and do that kind of thing. And it is tough. Like the percentage of failure is really, really high.
Just look at Zynga that we mentioned, and since Farmville, how many hits have they had?
Yeah,
and their stock price. I use the analogy of the movie industry. I think for that resonates well. Is you can build one hit movie, but to continually be a profitable movie studio putting out hit after hit is just beyond difficult, and that was definitely something we underestimated as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it was around the time that was. You're maybe seeing the writing on the wall a little bit with that. It wasn't quite getting the momentum that you were hoping that it would get when this kind of opportunity and idea around RotoGrinders presented itself. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And to the networking aspect, I was playing. So I always, the story I say is I was paying my way through college at the time playing online poker. This is the time online poker was booming. It's now legal in three states. It's starting. It was made illegal at one point. Black Friday hit, but at this time it was operating in a gray area and very popular. I'd played in a couple of European poker tour events overseas with the $10,000 buy-in. I wasn't like a top level poker player, but I had been aggressively bettering my game throughout college. So, and through that and to the networking effect of the program, I think it added a little credibility, but I met my business partners who owned pocket5s.com at the time. That's Cal Spears and Riley Bryant. And we kind of hit it off talking. I was a big member on the poker site, but we started talking fantasy football. And as someone following an online poker gambling type space closely, we noticed daily fantasy sports coming a little bit before, a lot actually technically before everyone else. At the time, it was a site called there's a couple small sites, and they, even before FanDuel was probably one of the second sites that emerged in the industry, and DraftKings wasn't even on the radar. This is years before DraftKings existed. The sites were very rudimentary, just drag and dropped from a menu to select your players. But we kind of sensed the opportunity and just the general culture of America that online poker's, there's a huge market for this. There's sports betting is something people are doing regardless of it being legal or not. And this kind of fit into that area of something that I personally believed, even way more so than poker, that these type of things would be legal, that the demand that people wanted them, it was coming. And so Cal had the idea and we kind of hit it off, and RotoGrinders started in, I believe, 2010 as the kind of community and content provider for that industry, with the goal of growing that site if the industry took.
Yeah. So you guys were super early on that, it obviously took off in a massive way in the upcoming years. So what did you guys decide to do at first? Like, what was the initial concept and vision for RotoGrinders?
So I mentioned the site Pocket Fives. One of their key competitive advantages was Cal and Riley had been able to pull data from online poker to rank online poker players. And the type of people that play these games are super competitive. So they love to see how they stack up against the competition. So we decided to apply that same formula to RotoGrinders. And that was kind of step one, beyond, building the website, forums, couple basic strategy articles. That was, I would say, the main feature. And that, what that does a good job of is getting high value users to register on your site. The people that are playing these games a lot, that have big wallets online, they're competing for money, they want to then to be in your ranking system, register and get on the site. So we started from day one building a community of high value daily fantasy players.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, because I'm sure part of your thinking was, if we can get this community of high value players on our site interacting with us, then as we roll out with additional products and services in the future, this will be a good group to have there. And also having this group will probably attract a lot of others.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
And there are some similar themes here between the story you're hearing and we'll continue to hear from Cameron and some of the stuff that I did with Sports Card Investor, because Cameron was very instrumental in the early days of Sports Card Investor. I called Cameron because I had known he had done all this stuff for RotoGrinders, and asked him a lot about this story and for advice, because I was just thinking about launching Sports Card Investor. And so part of this piece of the story inspired me to say, you know what, I'm going to start by creating content. I'm going to start, because I had the idea for Market Movers well before I actually launched the Sports Card Investor channel or website. But I decided to start with the content first, because if it could build audience, if it could build community, then when I rolled out with Market Movers, now I've already got community, right? Who I can now layer in Market Movers too. And Cameron was very big on the aspect of community, which is why when I launched Sports Card Investor, it was not just a YouTube show and a podcast, but it was also a Facebook group, and it was also a Discord chat server. And I was looking for, different ways along the journey to create community. In fact, our article submission program, which we had going for many years, or I shouldn't say many years, it hasn't been that many years, but we had it going from the very early days on, where people from our community could write articles to go on our website. That was one of Cameron's ideas from, something that had worked with him in the early days of RotoGrinders. So, but it's those types of, kind of entrepreneurial things that you do in the early stage that then start to lay the groundwork, build the audience to then allow you to do more. And so back to the RotoGrinder story. So you started with this concept of like, okay, we want to get these larger players in here, and we'll do these rankings and we'll do these scoreboardings. Were you making money off that, or was that just more of an audience building tactic?
I think we were still in the audience building tactic. We started in 2010. I think the first I still remember the first time a check came in for $7,000. I was sitting in a hotel in California for a wedding, and I was like, oh man, this could be real. That was from a company called Draft Street. DraftKings later acquired. That was in 2012. So there was about a 2-year phase back to the original point of needing to kind of buy social time. I remember during that 2-year phase, my dad kind of sitting me down at lunch and telling me maybe it's time to throw in the towel on RotoGrinders. So, not every company is fail fast. Sometimes it can take 2 years to slowly iterate, slowly build, and just get ahead of an idea. And that's what happened in this particular instance. So during that 2-year period, it was really community focused. And you see nowadays that has been, you see it way more often through companies like Twitch, and you mentioned Discord have basically built their entire businesses on providing platforms to build community. If you can then, take that and do it on your own and apply it to a high ceiling company like we did with Daily Fantasy, like you did with Sports Cards, it can be massive just having that high value user base. So we've done everything from like in-person events and parties, bringing some of our top users to Vegas to celebrate. That started in like 2013 and 14. That was early on. So it was and like you mentioned, the blog program, we met so many good people through that. It sounds like such a silly, simple topic, but we have multiple equity partners that literally reach nowadays that are on our cap table that we met because they just are passionate about the industry. It's a passion filter. It's a culture filter. It's a great way to those are the things we were focused on that time, finding the right teammates. And our SiriusXM show and podcast media director, Dan Bach, wrote an article for free in that blog program. We built a relationship. He wound up now building our entire SiriusXM program. Runs our 8 podcasts. So that's just another, benefit of this community concept. Somewhere around that 2012 time is when affiliate revenue started picking up and we started monetizing off that user base.
Yeah, and that turned out to be a big revenue play for you guys. I think like your biggest revenue play over the years, right? I mean, especially while daily fantasy was growing so much, the affiliate revenue that you got from a lot of those daily fantasy sports sites.
Absolutely. Affiliate marketing is a term a lot of people are familiar with, and me myself was familiar with. It takes years to master, and it's a very valuable skill set to have. And if you're not familiar with it, I can't recommend enough just becoming familiar with it, because no matter what online business you run, you might be leaving revenue on the table, because there's always to your point, the ceiling's was higher for us. So we do run a subscription model. I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit, but we were offering kind of what was in that subscription model, kind of like we'll say market movers for your audience. Our version of market movers, instead of paying us $49.99 a month, you could use our links to join FanDuel or DraftKings at the time for free. And we would provide that tool for you free. And affiliate marketing is structured in 2 different ways. There's either a CPA, cost per acquisition, meaning we refer that user, we get X dollars in return. But a lot of sites, especially in startup mode, like FanDuel and DraftKings, were offering rev share at the time. And that's when you refer a user and you're kind of tied directly to their lifetime value. So we're incentivized as a company to just in the growth of the industry, not just referring people for a quick buck, but also the industry growing, keeping people playing, keeping people coming back. And that was very successful for us with FanDuel and DraftKings on sites with multi-million-dollar prize pools, where a user could continuously buy into contests for tens of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars over the course of their lifetime value.
Yeah, I'm with you on the power of affiliate revenue. Here at Sports Card Investor, we actually kind of have it from 2 angles. We set up our own affiliate deals, much like you did. Like, for example, when it comes to our bulk submission grading of sports cards, we get affiliate revenue back as people submit sports cards for grading through our bulk submission service. On the flip side, we actually pay affiliates for marketing market movers. So we have our own affiliate network of people who have their own YouTube shows or their own social following, and they'll market movers. And then as they send people to us, they get an affiliate cut as well. We've actually seen both as being a really powerful revenue potential for our company to supplement our more standard revenue channels. And it sounds like for you guys that was a big part of the mix.
Yeah, definitely. Affiliate marketing can be such a powerful tools in both directions. Like you mentioned, I think the main benefit for a company, we'll use DraftKings as an example, is coming in and they did raise Series A of funding, but especially when you're just moving quick and trying to build a user base, using a rev share as opposed to CPA, affiliate marketing lets you leverage. You don't have to spend money. You can just have partners drive new users to you. And instead of paying an upfront marketing cost, you're paying a percentage of that user's revenue they generate based on their activity over the lifetime of the customer. So the company, works both ways, right? So the company can wind up paying more over the lifetime of the customer, but it allows them, and in the position we were in with FanDuel and DraftKings in early startup mode, trying to get to their $1 billion levels as quickly as possible, it was a just mutual relationship. We had a lot of, hundreds of thousands of high value users. We can market to these sites. They're not having to spend tons and tons of money to do that. It's based on performance. So for us personally, it wound up the lifetime rev share model allowed us to get these high value users on the site. Some of these users wound up spending tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars playing daily fantasy over the course of their life, which, as I mentioned earlier, we were asking users to join through our links to provide our premium product in exchange. So if we had just charged that user $49.99, oftentimes we're making way more money on the user by having them join our links. So that was the value of affiliate marketing for us, is it gave us from probably the years 2013 to 2017, a higher ceiling of revenue than we would have had otherwise by just being a subscription.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Definitely something for people out there who are running subscription-based businesses or products to think about. Like, your revenue source doesn't necessarily just have to be people paying a monthly fee. It can also come from other mechanisms through these types of partnerships that oftentimes can be a win-win for both, for both players involved. Interesting. That's really good stuff. So during those years where you guys were obviously, building affiliate revenue, and I know what RotoGrinders was doing was really growing in popularity. How was that growth? Like, where, back from the days when it was just you and your couple of partners through maybe the time you got acquired, because we're going to talk about that. I know that came as well. Like, how did you guys grow in terms of head count and that type of thing?
Sure. Yeah. So I think daily fantasy really started to pick up after FanDuel and DraftKings Series A's around 2013 to 14. At that time, we were working remotely, just a very bootstrap startup. I think one thing I should note is we never had to invest any capital beyond, I think Cal and Riley put in like around the $20,000 range to get things started and day one. So we were very bootstrapped, which made that 2-year period that it took to get going possible. So around 2014, things really started picking up after the Series A. 2015 is when everyone will remember the infamous DraftKings commercial barrage started, that it was almost like you couldn't watch TV without seeing too many commercials. Right around that time is when I remember Cal and I having a phone call, and him and Riley live in Nashville, where I'm at now, and just it's this thing's moving. It's time to open an office. So I actually moved to Nashville 2 days after I got married. Thank God my wife's a saint, but and went along with it. But we got married, we went home, we put our honeymoon on pause, we packed up, and we moved to Nashville and opened an office. It's actually in the same building I'm in now, but it was we're now in our 5th office here, because over the last from 2015 to 2021, we've grown every year to the point we've needed to get a bigger and bigger office. So now we're on the top floor and have the downtown Broadway Nashville view.
Nice. Cool. Very, very cool. That's awesome. And then somewhere along that way, you started getting acquisition interest. Tell us about that.
So around this time, we're back on track. Daily fantasies clearly heading in the right direction. The offers started coming back. Our first offer we seriously considered after NBC was a offer for about $20 million back in 2018. Thankfully, that didn't work out, but we considered it so seriously. It was signed. It went to the 11th hour. My wife even quit her job. She thought that it was going to go through, and that wound up falling through at the very last minute. So, it's never an easy road to sell a company, and diligence can last months. So, you work on this deal for months, and then it falls apart at the last second, if not a whole year. Luckily, it did fall through, though. Our valuation continued to just go up year over year. After a couple more offers, we found who we thought were the perfect fit in Better Collective. We met with their CEO and COO, Jesper and Christian, just really see eye to eye with our culture. We just kind of had that connection from day one. They do business the right way. And they're looking to bring their European leading sports betting content site, which is publicly traded on the Swedish exchange, to America. So we wound up being, we're basically one of their main offices in America and helping lead American operations. That deal, we sold 60% at a $35 million valuation. The rest of that 40% will be paid off of performance. This is all public. They're publicly traded, so it's all public performance this year, and couldn't be more optimistic about that performance and Better Collective's performance moving forward. So wound up being a huge blessing in disguise that all our previous deals did not work out, because we would have been leaving tens of millions of dollars on the table.
There's a couple really interesting things in that story I want to hit on. So first is, you kind of mentioned managing through the tumultuousness, of daily fantasy sports, all of a sudden being declared illegal by the New York, Attorney General and all that type of thing. Was there a moment there where you guys were like kind of panicked about that, because you had built your whole business model around this thing that now all of a sudden was starting to be looked at as like, this might not even be a legal thing?
I mean, man, that was the toughest part of my personal life. The stress in being an entrepreneur is already so high. And then to be under a microscope, technically it's DraftKings and FanDuel, but our business is tied to the industry. And the responsibility you feel for your employees and delivering paychecks to all of them. And some of them have moved and relocated their lives to Nashville to work in the office. And it's probably, the pressure you feel for a child of yours, but you feel the need to provide for all your employees. And then you might not be able to because of some regulatory issues. That was very, very hard for me personally. Luckily, we weren't under the microscope that FanDuel and DraftKings were. And luckily, FanDuel and DraftKings had the resources to hire lobbyists and get through it. And it only lasted a year or two. Going through the lobbying aspect was a very unique experience for me. I got to go to the local legislators, meet politicians, explain why keeping dollars in the U.S. tax system instead of overseas is beneficial, and how we're creating all these jobs locally that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So taking this industry away is just going to move more dollars out of the United States and create less jobs. So luckily, I think, luckily or not really luck, but I think everyone saw the pragmatic solution here. And now we have legal sports betting in 14 states and hopefully in Florida and many more.
Yeah. Legal daily fantasy sports, I guess, everywhere, right? Is daily fantasy sports legal everywhere?
There's still a few states it's not, like Utah, Hawaii, weirdly Arizona. They're working on that, but I think it's like 46 states.
Gotcha. And then hopefully sports betting, as you said, will get up to that level soon as well. And I know you all expanded into the sports betting area. And that has been, a boom for you. And I guess you guys are continuing to think about what spaces you're playing in, and it sounds like continue to evolve to, for the future.
Yeah. RotoGrinders and daily fantasy is extremely healthy business. It's revenue still growing, but there's so much upside in sports betting. The affiliate revenues we previously talked about, the average value of a customer in a sports book is much higher than that of a daily fantasy player. And that's what Better Collective and we do is refer responsible sports bettors to sports books. And we have been doing a very good job of that. We acquired a company called usbets.com and Sports Handle, founded by Adam Small and Brett Smiley, respectively. And they've been absolutely crushing it, building out ahead of states. So, we might be working on, for example, Florida. I expect to have legal sports betting next year or two. We might already be working on that website now so that when it is launched, we have a presence in Florida. So that's kind of the new business models, getting ahead state by state and expanding our community and content reach to these new legal states. Yeah,
that's anticipating the future and being a step ahead. That's a good success for any entrepreneurial venture. Before we wrap up here, Cameron, I want to talk about your foray into sports cards and NFTs, because you have, although your life has mainly been centered around, or your professional career, I should say, recently has mainly been centered around fantasy sports and sports gambling, you saw a lot of that early opportunity in the sports card market that I saw as well. And I know you approached it. You've been doing some content in that area, but you also approached it through like some personal investing in different types of cards there. And then more recently, I know you've been very, very bullish on NFTs, and you've been doing some investing in Top Shot. So tell us a little more about both of those things.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're giving me a little too much credit on the sports card space, because that was like 90% my focus was there because of you. Thank you. I remember you were a few years ago contemplating, we were talking about if there's any opportunities in the sports betting space. And I still remember the phone call you told me that you were instead going into sports cards, and it caught me really off guard. But I think I've told multiple people, when Jeff talks about something like that, you listen. And I immediately understood it within diving in. It's very, very similar to the mindset for a sports bettor or a daily fantasy gamer, or a lot of it is investing in players, finding value. I remember you did make a top 10 mistakes video early on, and I think I inspired about 5 of those mistakes, specifically buying a BGS 9 Rudy Gobert, which I finally have parted way with. That was my shameful purchase that I just couldn't live down. But I made a lot of mistakes early on, but I think I especially through Sports Card Investor, got a really quick grasp on it. Obviously listened to a couple of the buy lows you put out there. Thankfully, I got the LeBron Topps Chrome rookie at $5,000 during the COVID drop. And I think that's probably still my best buy. A couple of cheap Shaqs, Topps Gold. But anyways, yeah, it just translated very well to me. Like many people that are watching this from the sports card market, just went all in. It's totally consuming. I think my favorite purchases are a Steph Curry rookie patch auto for $1,000 way back when I started, which that's looking like a great one. And then I got one of I think it's 9 to, I forget the population of the Tiger Woods perforated Sports Illustrated Kids rookie recently for $35,000 with my business partner, Dan Bach.
Yeah, that's a great one too, that I think is going to be a wonderful long-term hold for sure. I
know you touched on, you wanted to hear about Top Shot and NFTs.
Yeah.
I think, just to big disclaimer, because everyone's got opinions and there's so many crazy things to invest in right now. But I think just specific to Top Shot and sports cards, both can exist. It doesn't have to be a versus battle. NFTs as a whole, I'm mostly only in Top Shot, and I think there's a lot of crazy things going on in the market right now. But what really stood out to me about Top Shot, I view it in my bucket of an angel investment. What excited me about this was I dove in, and it wasn't a pixelated art that you buy for $1 million. It wasn't. What it was to me was I opened the first pack, and the experience was just, whoa, there's music playing. Whoa, this is addictive. This is fun. Ripping the digital pack was almost as fun as ripping a real pack. And that got my attention. Started diving in. Big shout out to LG Doucette from the First Mint podcast. Subscribe to that if you are interested in getting into NBA Top Shot. He's become a friend of mine. Luckily, he mentored me early on, and this was in January before it really took off. It just became clear to me that Top Shot, and this is coming to someone who plays games like Hearthstone, where you can purchase digital cards and you don't even own them. I have thousands of dollars of cards in Hearthstone digitally. I have a complete collection just to play the game, and I don't even own those. So to me, it was a historic moment, and you can laugh at that, but it was a historic moment because this was one of the first and best applications of blockchain to an actual product, in my opinion. It took something people already desired, it's already in demand, which is the sports card industry, and it applied blockchain to it in a way that made sense. It gave ownership the same way you want to own a card. And as Mark Cuban says, all you need is that sense of ownership. And then after that, you're ripping packs. It's just as fun as sports cards. You have that collection you're flipping through, just like you flip through your pages or your PSA case. And it feels like card investing. So there's 2 reasons I invested. One was that I believe in it and it's digital. And then also I didn't want to miss out. I think it was 30% just FOMO that, oh man, I want to hedge my bet with sports cards. Since then, I've come back down on that. And I think that there's a market where both can exist. I view sports cards kind of as, we use the terms of daily fantasy, a cash game or a tournament play. Cash game is usually you're safer. You think this thing's going to be very likely to return a positive ROI. That's sports cards for me. That's kind of more of a savings account investment, as I call it. I'm very comfortable investing money directly from my checking or savings account into sports cards. I'm so bullish that market is not going anywhere. As we've seen with Top Shot, it's going to be higher variance, similar to crypto, and that's why it comes out of my angel fund account. So I've made several angel investments, and I spend a lot of time trying to help with those companies: Dibs, Underdog, Altman Insights, Star Stock, who was founded by FanDuel. I kind of view Top Shot as that right now because there is a lot of inherent risk, but it also has that potential to, maybe get you a 7 to 15 return on your money if this really does take off and become a digital form of sports cards.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And I love the split from the angel investing account and the cash account. It's a really interesting way of looking at it. And the fact that you've classified, the NFTs as a little more speculative, a little more risky, coming out of the account that potentially is a little more risky, yet has the higher upside, has the higher reward, whereas the sports card side, a little more of a safe, sure investment, seems to be that at least. And certainly with sports cards, you've got a much longer history that the more rare, more iconic cards have over the course of many, many years continue to progress up in value. So we would hopefully expect to see more of the same of that over time with sports cards. That's an interesting analogy. So I'll get you out of here on the
same thing with sports cards that led to me starting RotoGrinders is that at the end of the day, it's something people want. And that's what entrepreneurship is. That's what a capitalistic society provides. At the end of the day, people wanted sports betting. I had a 60-year-old woman I worked with in my office hosting March Madness brackets. Everyone's involved. It's in our American culture. Sports cards have been around since the 50s. They've gone away. They've had issues, but they keep coming back because people want them. And I think that's why sports betting is here now. And that's why I don't think sports cards are going away. At the end of the day, there's just too much demand.
And I loved what you talked about when you were describing your first experience with NBA Top Shot and how ripping that pack and going through that experience made you feel like, you know what, this is something other people are going to want too. Sometimes that is all it takes to identify the next trend and to hop on the next trend early. So I think that's an awesome story. Cameron, this has been great. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining the Owner Suite.
It's an honor. Thanks for everything you helped me with along the way in my entrepreneurial journey. And thanks for having me on.
100%. Appreciate it, man. Take care.
Thanks for joining us in the Owner Suite. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed the conversation and leave a review to help spread the word. Follow Jeff on Twitter and Instagram at Jeff352. And check out Jeff's growth agency, 352, at growwith352.com. See you next time in the Owner Suite.